When you start looking at what we expect from Todd Bowles' defense, we expect him to run a lot of single high coverages. So when you're talking about one defender in the middle of the field, that's where these splash plays can develop. It's a pass funnel matchup against one high coverages, and that is something where I'm highly interested in Terry McLaurin.
1 week season.
And welcome in, OWS fam. Glad that you are with us. This is the DFS Lab brought to you by 1 week season. Really, the purpose of this show is to build a DraftKings lineup and really use that as a vehicle to talk through strategy as we progress through the week. I'm your host, Cheeseman. I'll be with you on the DFS Lab all season, 4 days a week with a different guest each day of the week. As you can see from the graphic here, on Mondays, it'll be Zandamir talking Showdown, and then Tuesdays we'll have Hilow. Wednesday, Mike Johnson will host that show and focusing on Fanduel, and then Thursday and Friday, it'll be Stat ATL and Pappy, respectively. With me, I've been with OWS since the fall of 2021, really behind the scenes editing content. Really excited to be hosting this season. I started my DFS journey in the fall of 2015, and outside of OWS, I'm a sports broadcaster. I do Division I college basketball and been doing that for 11 years. So this is in my wheelhouse, but just very excited to be a part of the OWS fam in this way this coming season. So today I have got the pleasure of welcoming in Hilow. You guys know him well. Hilow, how you doing, man? And how you feeling about week one of this NFL season?
Dude, I am so stoked. I mean, we've been waiting for this moment. I mean, it's like Christmas, you know, drill, dude. You said you've been playing DFS for so long, and it's really cool to be able to like put a face to the letters, because I've been sending content to you for editing, for posting, for behind the scenes work for 2 or 3 years, I think now. So this year will be the third year. Yeah. So it's really cool to be able to talk with you, to jam. And it's really cool to be able to see the OWS fam continue to grow, really, as we have. So yeah, I'm stoked. I'm stoked for the season. Stoked to talk with you. Let's get it, man.
Hey, and right back at you, man. Same with you. Ton of respect for just what you bring to the table, writing content, and obviously hosting a lot of shows, best ball, and of course the slate, which that is hands down just one of the best shows in my opinion in the industry. And of course, this week at 1 week season, all that content is free. So definitely head over there and check it out. But yeah, I mean, what's getting into it? Week one is always such an interesting week because you have kind of this buildup of excitement and people are so excited to get back out there and play DFS again. But a lot of times pretty unexpected things happen in week one. What's kind of your approach going into week one and your mindset and just how you're trying to build, but also maneuver around the field? Because again, the chalk just naturally forms, and probably in week one, potentially more than any other time of the season.
Yeah, and it's this effect, it's the psychological effect in week one where we feel like we know a lot more than we know in week one. And that comes from the 6 months of best ball we've been doing, all of our season-long leagues, everything that we've been doing to prepare. We think we know these teams. And then week one happens and we're like, oh shit, like nothing happened like we thought it would. So that degree of uncertainty and that heavy bias, I think, are the two main things with week one that we really, really have to fight against. So I try and come in with as open of a mind as I can. Obviously, I've been grinding best ball for 6 months now with the Best Ball Plus package, with my own portfolio. So like, I feel like I know these teams, and it's really, really hard to drop that hat and be like, okay, what happens if XYZ happens? What happens if this team doesn't look anything like I thought they would? What happens if player usage pans out different? So that's really a key thing that we need to keep in mind for week one, is like, we probably don't know as much as we think we know.
Yeah. Do you expect any major surprises in week one? I always remember back to the fall of 2018 when, just out of the blue, I'm sure you remember this, Ryan Fitzpatrick just blew up in the first 2 weeks of the 2018 season. Fitzmagic, it was that 2 weeks. And then, the first week it happened, everyone thought it was a fluke. Then it happened again the second week. And by week 3, when everyone was on him, the magic ended. And so do you see anything that could happen, or some kind of unexpected kind of dark horses that maybe it is like a flame that burns hot for a couple of weeks and then fades out?
That's a very, very interesting question. We'll just say no. I don't think there's one single situation I can think of like that. But what I'll draw that back to is like were 18 more, I can't remember the exact number, defensive coordinator changes this offseason. So that's going to be, I mean, it was more than half of the league. I have to go back and count. But if you look at the coaching changes, I mean, there are now 13 former Gary Kubiak coaching tree coaches calling offenses. There are now like 18 to 20 new defensive coordinators. So like this season is going to be very different. And it starts to make sense like why there was that massive amount of turnover this season. It's like look at defensive tendencies over the last 6-7 seasons. I mean, cover one and man coverage was down to a decade low last year at 24% man coverage rates around the league. So we're starting to shift to and now like the primary defensive coverage shell from zone is not cover 2 anymore. It's cover 3. And that was up over 33%. So like the league is changing. And like 10 years ago, it was this like pass heavy league. It was like Drew Brees. It was, these pocket style quarterbacks where we're just dominating the league, like Tom Brady, Drew Brees. We had Peyton Manning, like all these quarterbacks. And what we saw is they were lighting up the league with all these 5,000-yard seasons because they were seeing like man coverage and cover 2, and it became very easy to manipulate that. Now with like the defensive tendencies changing, like we're starting to see cover 3 reigning supreme from zone, lower coverages or lower rates of man coverage, lower blitz rates. It's like we're sitting back, we're allowing the play to develop in front of us. We're keeping 6-7 players with their eyes in the backfield to manage a quarterback. So it's a very different league now, and I think we're going to see that transpire, and we started to last season as well. Like scoring is down, it's very, very hard. We're seeing like all these game totals in the 40 to 45 point total range. Seriously. So like, yeah, it's very, very different. So what that means is like there's fewer like had to have it situations per week, and we really have to get those right if we want to be successful moving forward.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move into it. I'm going to jump over to DraftKings here, and we can take a look. Okay, so can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just going to jump into create a lineup here, and we're going to build. We kind of just mentioned for a second before the show started, we're going to kind of build with the $100 millionaire maker or something like that contest size, where you still have kind of the volatility of a millionaire maker style contest, but not just like the massive field size that you would typically see, like 100,000. What is the typical field size of that kind of contest, like $100 milli type contest size?
Yeah, in week 1, it's like 29,000. We don't see the $100 milli maker every week, and we don't see the $5 milli maker every week. I mean, look at the $5 milli maker has like 977,000 people. Insane. So like when we look at like contest selection, just real quick, we have to be changing our strategy based on the field size, because the more entries that are in a contest, the closer to the optimal roster we're going to need. So things like team stacks, team overstacks, those become a little bit less viable the larger the field size. Those are a little bit more tailored to the smaller stuff. So this like $100 milli maker is kind of in the middle somewhere. So when we're like transitioning our mindset to that, we're going to need to embrace some additional variance, but we know we don't need as close to the optimal roster to be successful here. So that's kind of the mindset going in when we're talking about contest selection here.
I love it. Okay, let's start off here and just look at the quarterback position. Quarterback stacks. I mean, I always like to start with just trying to think through like which quarterback or offense could have a monster week, like 400 plus yards, 4 touchdowns, and hopefully they bring their receivers with them. And obviously you have some games that are already standing out, reading some of the research, which includes some of your writing on the NFL Edge. That Houston-Indianapolis game looks really interesting. But as you kind of look at that, let's just start quickly at the top end and then look at kind of maybe some of the value plays. But what direction are you kind of starting out with in terms of your thoughts at quarterback?
Yeah, Houston Indy is a very, very it probably has the greatest chance to develop into like a shootout style game. That said, like it's probably a lower chance of that happening than like your quote unquote standard slate. Um, all of that, what that means is there's really no true game on this slate where it's like I'm honing in on this game and I have to have it, and if you don't have it, you're losing. Um, Indy and Houston, like Houston, we expect them to have some level of offensive success here. They do not have a focused offense. They added Stephon Diggs, they added Joe Mixon, they have Tank Dell still, they have Nico Collins still. We don't know what their 11 personnel rates are going to be. We expect them to be high in 11 personnel, but again, like they were towards the bottom of the league in 11 personnel in preseason. So it's like, is that a function of, hey, we were just playing our backups? Is that a function of we're going to be rotating Tank Dell and Steph Diggs? Like, we don't really know. So, like, if I'm looking at this, it's highly likely that one of these wide receivers is going to matter. But again, like CJ Stroud only had like 4 games that were GPP worthy last year. So, all of that, like the uncertainty here is off the charts. So when I'm looking to anchor a roster, I don't necessarily think that I'm starting here with Houston and Indy. When you talk about we don't want to use guaranteed, but when we talk about like higher chances of success at quarterback, there's really 2 names to me that stand out here, and they're kind of at the 2 ends of the spectrum. The first is Josh Allen. He's playing a Cardinals defense that led the league in cover 4, was near the top of the league in 2 high defensive alignments, and Josh Allen just shredded that last season. There's a lot of uncertainty. Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty with his pass catchers. We have Curtis Samuel, who has the turf toe going on, so we expected him to kind of be like a queen chess piece. They're going to give him schemed usage, potentially carries out of the backfield. But how effective is that going to be with turf toe? I don't know. And then it's like they have a rookie and 1 holdover in Khalil Shakir. When I like break down this offense, to me, it's Khalil Shakir, 6 foot, 190 pounds. It's Khalil Shakir that is the most like ready to be a continuous contributor to this offense from the jump. We look at his metrics over the second half of last season. We all know he outperformed Steph Diggs on half of the targets over the second half of last season. This is a guy that has big play potential. So Josh Allen and Khalil Shakir stand out to me as somewhere to start. But where I want to take this roster is actually somebody that I have shit on the entire offseason, and that is Jayden Daniels. So let's start with Jayden Daniels. And the reason for that is when we talked about Houston and Indy as being like the game with probably the best chance to shoot out, I would say the game with probably the second greatest chance to shoot out is this Washington-Tampa Bay game. And when you're talking about the quarterbacks in that game, if Baker Mayfield is succeeding, if the Tampa Bay offense is succeeding, now we have Jayden Daniels on the other side of this in this horizontal spread offense. Horizontal spread offense is built, obviously, to create space in the horizontal plane. They do very little to extend the defense in the vertical. And I mean, literally, like if you look at the Cliff Kingsbury offense, it's like they run 3 routes. It's like they run a go, and then they run some of this hitch crossers stuff over the middle of the field. And if that's the case, like we're talking about extending a defense in the horizontal plane. And if Jayden Daniels against this defense that we expect out of Tampa, if he sees single high coverage, that helps first read target share deep on go routes, on stuff deep. And then you start looking at like the composition of this offense. It's like we expect a 33-year-old Zach Ertz to be the primary tight end. We don't expect Sinnott because Cliff Kingsbury is Cliff Kingsbury to be really involved to begin the season. They went out and they got their wide receiver 2 a week ago in Noah Brown, who is very capable, but he's had 12 days when this game kicks off to learn the offense. So it becomes this like, we expect this to be extremely concentrated. It's Jayden Daniels for what he can do deep and what he can do with his legs. And it's the guy who we're going to add next to this roster in Terry McLauren.
Yeah, I love that actually. And I've heard that Jayden Daniels I think it was reports out of camp that his deep ball is really good. And Terry McLaurin he is, despite having fairly mediocre quarterback play for much of his career so far, he's still put up some very tournament-worthy scores for DFS. So I love that.
Yeah, and then like when you start looking at what we expect from Todd Bowles' defense, we expect him to run a lot of single high coverages. So when you're talking about one defender in the middle of the field, that's where these splash plays can develop. And we get this kind of, Vita Vea has been a staple in the league at nose tackle since his rookie season in 2018. And he has been an above average graded nose tackle in all but one season. And that was his 2021 season when he was playing injured for most of it. So it's a pass funnel matchup against one high coverages. And that is something where I'm highly interested in Terry McLaurin. And he's not really priced in a range where we expect him to gather a lot of ownership. There's Tank Dell in his range. There's Malik Neighbors in his pricing range. So I kind of expect McLaurin to go relatively overlooked here.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so let's look at running back. So we got Daniels and McLaurin. Actually, I will ask you real fast. Do you want to bring back someone from Tampa Bay here? Obviously, if this game does get going, you always have Mike Evans, and Mike Evans he just continues to produce. 31st or 7,300 though. It's pricey for a receiver, but not terrible. Or maybe there's another guy in Tampa Bay you're looking at.
No, Mike Evans is the dude this week. We have a ton of change in Washington, and they're coming off of a 32nd ranked pass defense. The other thing of that is like they didn't do a ton to improve their pass defense. They drafted a nickel corner in the second round this season, but it's like they still have Benjamin St-Juste, and they still have these guys that are kind of Emmanuel Forbes, these guys that we've perennially been attacking on this defense. And now Dan Quinn entering the picture. Look at his defenses throughout his coaching career. They are blitz heavy and they are man coverage heavy. Last season, they ranked second in the league in single high coverage rate in Dallas, and they ranked third in the league in man coverage rate. And that was around 30-ish%. So man coverage, single high, this screams Mike Evans. So he's a very, very natural add to this roster.
Absolutely. I love it. Okay. So I don't want to move on too quick, but anything else you want to address with that game, or should we move on to maybe the running back position here and get a sense, or maybe we could go defense or tight end just to kind of get a sense of where we're sitting in terms of salary?
Defense is probably going to be one of the last positions we fill in this roster. I think there are a lot. We'll just cover real quickly from the grip. Like the Vikings and the Bears stand out to me on paper because we have these extremely aggressive defensive coordinators. You look at what Chicago did in the second half of last season after Montez Sweat was added. And these are two teams playing offensive lines that are expected to be in the bottom half of the league, bottom 10 of the league. And with the Giants, depending on who you ask or where you look, the last rated offensive line this season. So those are kind of pencil holders. Pencil those guys in. They're kind of similar in price, Vikings and Bears. But you can put one of them in if you want.
I'll just drop one in for now, and we'll see if we have to adjust later. So you want to look at running back now?
Let's look at wide receiver still.
Absolutely. So obviously at the top, week one, sometimes during week one, it seems like you have kind of like a mega chalk piece that's underpriced, for their role. I remember when Dak Prescott was just coming into the league and he was like 5K. It didn't pan out. I remember he didn't even have that great of a game, but every once, it seems like always during week one, there's some cheap receiver that everyone's going to be on. Is there anything that's, as I've done my research so far, unless I've missed it, it doesn't seem like there's that screaming piece this year so far that everyone's going to be playing. And so you kind of have to make the decision of, do I pivot off or do I just eat that chalk?
Yeah. I think a lot of that will probably depend. I mean, I haven't looked at ownership yet. Ownership is going to change so much, but
It is.
there's a lot of places where it's like we don't really know the full extent of the health. I mean, the first injury report, practice report will come out Wednesday. Will give us a little bit better idea. But I mean, you have situations like Cincinnati where Jamar Chase still hasn't practiced leading up to this week 1 game.
Right.
Is he going to play? I mean, you look at like what T. Higgins did with Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase out, and it's like he put up solid like back end wide receiver 1 production, and he's not priced like that for week 1. So there's a lot of uncertainty. If Jamar Chase continues his holdout and doesn't play, we're probably going to see a lot of ownership on T. Higgins, even against New England. I mean, New England, they have a really, really good secondary. Like the back half of their defense is elite, but they really struggle to generate pressure in the backfield. They're stout against the run, and they have a pretty good secondary. So if you're giving Joe Burrow a clean pocket and time, it really doesn't matter like how good your secondary is, right? They're just going to pick that apart.
Absolutely.
So yeah, he's an interesting one. I mean, we mentioned Malik Neighbors. I think he's going to draw a lot of ownership this for week 1, based on his offseason hype and best ball stuff. But I mean, he's playing a defense that we're targeting. He is playing a defensive coordinator that is going to bring the pressure on his quarterback. So now it's like they have one of the lowest Vegas applied team totals on the slate. So like he was not going to sink you, but he probably is not going to help you win a GPP in week 1. So he's kind of more or less a stay away for me at ownership in this spot. But if you keep scrolling down, we mentioned a guy that earlier when we were talking about Josh Allen, and this is a way to get a piece of that game and that offense, and that's Khalil Shakir. So let's add him in here, and that should give us still, a pretty good salary to work with the rest of this roster.
Absolutely. Yeah, because tight end, you can save a little salary there, or maybe you want to go a little more expensive. You want to look at tight end here or jump over
let's do that. Let's stick with tight end. Tight end is going to be very interesting because there's a lot of big names on this slate, but there's also a lot of big names missing.
Of names, in week 1, just a lot of names overall missing.
Yeah. So Hawkinson is on PUP. We have the Eagles that are playing earlier on Friday this season. In Brazil or something. Yeah, it's insane. Obviously Travis Kelce isn't on the slate. So now when you look at like the top layer of tight end, it's kind of like there's 7 maybe names in the NFL right now that can like put the week out of reach, where you had to have that score. It's like Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, maybe Dalton Kincaid is in that discussion, George Kittle. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. Maybe Kyle Pitts is in that discussion this year. And then Sam Laporta, who is also not on the slate. So like of those names, who do we have on this slate? It's like, it's just the Arizona Buffalo guys. It's just Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid. So if that's the case, now we need fewer people to fail at the top range to give some of these other guys like a fighting chance to be in the, not necessarily optimal discussion, but like in the GPP worthy discussion. When that's the case, from a psychological aspect, I expect the field to largely want to pay down. So when you scroll down real quick for me on these names, we're probably going to see a large chunk of ownership settle in the like 4,400 range and below. So if that's the case, and we only have 2 guys that need to fail at the top, but we expect the field to be coming down, I kind of like this like middle to upper tier range of pricing. And one guy that really stands out to me, I scroll up a little bit more, is Jake Ferguson at 5,200. The reason for that is we have a game where we expect both offenses to be more tilting towards the pass. I mean, the Browns are without Nick Chubb. They have Jerome Ford there, but it's like, how much do we expect them to be kind of catering to the run in this spot? And we have a Dallas offense who we expect to be probably the most pass-heavy offense in the league this season. Then we have CeeDee Lamb, who held out until a week and a half ago.
Right.
So what's his conditioning level at? I don't know. Like, we expect the Cleveland defense to play a ton of man coverage, which benefits CeeDee Lamb. But if he's not necessarily like full CeeDee just yet, the Browns also play a lot of cover 2. And Jake Ferguson was Dak Prescott's favorite target against cover 2. So this gives me an interesting way to get exposure to a top offense, a pass heavy offense in a spot where I don't expect him to draw much ownership at all this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that angle. And especially because, like you said, Cleveland's run defense is good. And CD, repeating what you said, you don't know what his conditioning level is going to be. And so really a good way to kind of get away from the field there. So that really leaves us with running back now. And running back is an interesting position because, what do you really expect? Obviously, you got Taylor and Bijan Robinson, but with McCaffrey out, how much do you focus on paying up at running back here? And really, if you're paying up, you're hoping that these guys can get you 25 to 30, whereas there's a good chance they may not get that, and you could be happy with a guy in that mid-range getting you 15 to 20, with just the state of the running back position in the NFL right now.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like we're no longer in like the Team Jam 'em in days, and we've been talking about this for multiple years, like the Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson heyday, where it was like you could just pencil them in for 25 to 35 points, and it's like, okay, I'll pay whatever you are asking in both price and ownership for that. Yeah, so like we're beyond that, and again, that comes back to the NFL game where it's like it's changing. So when I'm looking at the running backs, I'm kind of trying to see a combination of leveraging the uncertainty with the backfield, like who can be a closer to a 75 to 85% opportunity share guy, where they're currently projected to be maybe a 60 to 65%. And I'm looking at game environments because we know touchdowns to be so heavily correlated to running back production. So the name that stands out to me right off the grip on this offense is we talked about Houston before, and it's like we expect them to achieve some level of offensive success. The pass catchers, we don't really know who that's going to be, but like, what if Joe Mixon is a 70%, 75% snap rate guy? I mean, look at the depth behind him on the depth chart. It's like they have Dameon Pierce, who we know struggles in this run scheme. They have Cam Akers, who's coming off multiple lost seasons. And they have Dare Ogunbowale, who's a special teamer. So they got nothing. So Joe Mixon is a very interesting guy for me for week 1.
Yeah, I love that call. And, obviously just the scheme, Houston, how different is it from Cincinnati that could potentially, because I've heard Joe Mixon's name mentioned multiple times, that the change of scenery for him may be, whereas some people might view it as, he's kind of, his career is on the downwards at this point, but the change of scenery actually could be big for him career-wise.
Yeah, and you look at like the coaching remarks from Bobby Slowick all offseason was like, we're so stoked to have this dude. We know he can be like a workhorse running back. And that, like, everything they were saying was like, yeah, he might be like a borderline workhorse guy.
Well, we got 11,000 left, about 5,600 average remaining. This is always, when I'm building lineups, this is always tough to try and figure out, like, do you pay up and then pay down, or do you try and kind of split that difference? What are your thoughts here?
I kind of just mess around with all of it. You can utilize an optimizer to do that. You can utilize just messing around here and poking around with your hand. Put in Devon Chan, and let's just see what's left.
So 43 now.
All right, now scroll down. Like, what do we got to work with? We might have to alter this, but I haven't played around with building too much just yet. So, yeah, not a lot to love.
Right,
do the double tight end Taysom, dude.
Right,
no,
yeah.
Don't do that.
Taysom Hill, yeah, there we go. Hopefully he runs a couple in from the quarterback position or wherever they put him.
Yeah, Taysom is a name to keep in your back pocket throughout the season, I think, this year. So he's probably going to ruin a couple of slates. All right, let's get rid of Achane and go back to running back. Look at some other names. Scroll down a little bit. Kenneth Walker is very interesting to me. Javonte Williams is very interesting to me from that same game. Plug in Javonte right at 5,500.
All right, so that leaves us 56. So let's see, what do we got here? Najee
Tank
Harris,
Dell range.
Sutton, Joku, Ford. I mean, for Cleveland being at home, maybe, but I mean, running back in the flex. I don't know. I'm not a huge running back in the flex guy.
Yeah.
But it can work. Obviously, Tank Dell. It's tough though. I mean,
yeah, this is one where like either Jerome Ford or Tank Dell make a lot of sense on this roster. If you play Tank Dell, it's kind of the Houston just blows out Indy, and you don't need a bring back, and you don't need the quarterback because two of the scores come on the ground with Joe Mixon, but Tank Dell goes for like 6 for 140 and 1, and like it doesn't matter. Let's do that. Let's put Tank Dell in.
okay.
It's a way to attack this game where we expect Houston to succeed in a way that the field probably isn't in week 1.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, if you guess right, which obviously to take down a GPP, you need some luck. And with this Houston situation, it really is kind of a factor of trying to guess which one of those three. And I hate guessing games, but sometimes you just got to kind of take a risk and hopefully spread it across the portfolio of lineups, and hopefully you hit one of them. So
yeah, particularly I think that decision is made with the Houston particularly because this is a 29,000 person field. This is a way to get access to immense upside in ways that I don't really expect to be utilized in that contest, really.
Absolutely. Well, there it is. There's one final look at the lineups, at the lineup that we built in case you guys want to have one final look at it. Well, Hilow, thanks so much for joining us, man. This is going to be fun. Just a great way to kind of get, OWS subscribers and even people who haven't subscribed yet just ready for the week. So I really appreciate you coming on and joining us. Great insight.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to this all season, dude.
Absolutely. Well, head over to oneweekseason.com. Everything there, all the content is free this week. All you have to do is sign up for a free account. And obviously, a great time if you've been on the fence about joining 1 Week Season. Now might be a time to check it out. Hilow, thanks for joining us once again, and we will catch you guys next time.
See you, fam.